to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. A couple of weeks ago, Jessica Bantom joined me on the podcast for what was supposed to be a regular one interview and done show. But we realized, Jessica and I, we had way more to discuss than the one show allowed. So today, Jessica is back with us for part 2 of our conversation on becoming a culturally competent design activist. Many of you probably heard part 1, and if you did, I hope since then you've got your hands on Jessica's new book, Design for Identity: How to Design Authentically for a Diverse World. If you didn't, that's okay. Part 1, episode 908 is linked in the show notes along with Jessica's book. I highly recommend digging into them both to make the most of each of these episodes. All right, so either way though, don't worry, jump right in today and continue listening, okay? This is one of the things I love about Jessica. She talks clearly and directly to how to become a culturally competent design activist, making it easy and relatable and enabling each of us to jump in where we are. If you don't know her already, Jessica Bantom is an interior designer and color consultant. She is also a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging DEIB practitioner and workplace strategist, helping organizations develop customized strategies for transformational change and enabling individuals to act immediately to become more inclusive. Mark my words. Jessica is going to take the design industry to all new levels. Since meeting her and talking with her in depth, I have probably called a half a dozen people and said, you need to know this lady. You need to get her book. You need to pay attention. You need to book her on stages, okay? She will be speaking at High Point Market this October 14th, okay, 2023. I'm not taking credit for that. That was already organized, okay? So at the theater at 3 p.m., October 14th, 2023. I'm going to tell you, when Jessica told me about this, I reached out to the two organizers of the panels that I was already scheduled to moderate on that Saturday. I had one set up for 2 o'clock and one set up for 4 o'clock. And I'm saying to myself, I don't want to miss this. I don't want to miss this presentation. What are we going to do? So I got the 4 o'clock to nudge a little later. The 2 o'clock had restrictions with the showroom. So I will be hightailing it between the 3 locations because I want to see her in person. Okay, I want you to be in that audience too. I think you will be glad I suggested you do this, okay? You know how I always say, decide to be excellent at the end of each show? Well, Jessica not only decides to be excellent each day when it comes to design and DEIB, but she wrote the book on it. Literally, she wrote down what it takes to be an excellent culturally competent designer, and she's sharing it with us, okay? So in part 1, our first conversation together, we talked about the why and the what of the state of diversity in design, okay? Actually, let's be real, the lack of diversity in designing for identity, right? Today, we are talking about the how. Jessica walks us through the 6 habits of culturally competent designers that she has outlined in her book. We're going to go step by step and learn how to make changes, because when we first change ourselves, then together we will change the industry. And that's what I mean when I say decide to be excellent. Okay? Excellence isn't just about beautiful designs, state-of-the-art systems, and a big bank account. That's not even the beginning of it. Excellence is holistic. We are holistic beings. Our world is a holistic space. Everything is interconnected, influencing each thing back and forth, just as these 6 steps do. My goal, when I ask you, when I tell you to decide to be excellent, is for you to recognize the connections and make the shifts that you need to in your life so that you are taking your whole life into account, so that you are bringing balance and satisfaction to every area, whether that is your physical health, your emotional health, or your social health, which this category, cultural competence, falls into, right? You've probably heard me talk about LuAnn Live and our theme this year, health and wealth. If you follow me on social, you know I'm having a health kick of my own over here. So, physical health isn't just about, health isn't just about physical, or wealth isn't just about money. Okay. I'm doing this conference and talking with people like Jessica because I want you to understand how crucial the holistic approach is in life and business. It's all connected. We're all connected. And if we don't have these kinds of conversations, we'll miss out. So let's hear about these 6 habits from Jessica so that we can start making more of these holistic connections and become more culturally competent as designers. Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming back to A Well-Designed Business with me today.
Hi, LuAnn. Thanks for having me back. I'm glad to continue the conversation.
Yes, because we have to get to the action part, right? We did a lot of conversation about the what it is and what it means and how it impacts each of us and our colleagues and everything else. But today we're going to get to your action steps, and we're going to talk about the 6 habits of culturally competent designers. And you know me, I love a good action plan, Jessica. So why don't you get us started? Do you need to describe or open up this conversation in some way? Because if you do, please feel free to. Otherwise, if you're like, nope, let's just get into the steps, you lead us through this, Jessica.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's great just to jump in this sense
Okay.
of action. We can dive in.
Okay. So the first step, the first habit number 1 is take accountability. So talk to us a little bit about that. How do we do that? What's your suggestions there?
Sure. So taking accountability is all about being willing to speak up when you see something happening. So if you see a design decision being made that maybe you think maybe culturally insensitive, or there's just something about it that just doesn't seem right, as designers, we have to be willing to raise our hands and say something. I think there's a tendency at times for us to think, oh, well, maybe someone else will say it, or maybe I'm just seeing things, and if no one else mentions it, maybe it's not that big of a deal. So I can see this kind of tendency in some instances for people to just be like, well, somebody else will catch it.
Right.
And especially in such an iterative process as design, you might think somewhere along the line somebody may say something, and if they do, then we'll address it at that point. But I think it's also a challenge because some of the people who are most likely to pick up on these things are people from marginalized backgrounds. But we are often in the minority in the spaces that we're in. So there can be hesitation about speaking up when we do see things that are, as I mentioned, culturally insensitive, sending the wrong signals, or just flat out wrong or offensive. So we have to keep that in mind, that there may be instances. I know I've been in spaces where maybe I felt like there might be retaliation or retribution, or I might be labeled as the troublemaker, or the sensitive one, because I brought up something that no one else in the room saw. So that is, I'm very sensitive to that fact, and the fact that there are many of us in that predicament in design and in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day careers. But still, we have to go back to that point about, as individuals, as designers, taking that ownership. And like I said, I know that's a big ask for some people, but that also goes to the point that all of us need to adopt these habits so that there is no one outlier in the team or in the organization that is the one speaking up. It becomes a normal part of conversation. And when a point is raised, it can be something that can be discussed more broadly.
So what I'm hearing is, number 1, we're talking predominantly in the design process, like during it, not letting that design get all the way out the door when you've been feeling and seeing in your gut, this isn't really right. Like, this does not really support all humans, all cultures, all races. There is a slight or a something insensitive happening here. And so you're saying, at first I have to tell you, like, this is how naive I am about design and things like that. At first I was like, oh, she means if you're out in the world and you see a design that's inappropriate. And, maybe that's true, but it's a completed product. But you're talking actually much more proactively during the process. You're part of a team that's creating something, whether it's for a residential home, a commercial installation, a hospitality space, and you're saying speak up.
Exactly, exactly. Because what's happening now is I think people do see things like this happening. I think they see them even in the concept phase. There may be
Yes.
those signals where it's like, maybe we could take this in another direction. Like there are other ways we could do this. But once again, if nobody speaks up, that gets, cemented into the final concept. Um, Selections start happening, approvals start happening, then you're in production and installation and everything, and it's too late.
Right, right.
Or if you bring it up, especially at that point, people will say it's too late because it's too expensive to correct now, and things just keep going, and harm is
Right.
ultimately done.
Right. And then the other 2 points, well, the one other point that I heard very clearly too is that it's likely that the person who sees that warning, that red flag early in the process is the person who has the sensitivity to it. And so therefore, it makes it even more difficult. And you're saying, if you're the one seeing it, you have the sensitivity to it, have some courage and do it. But what I'm also hearing is that the entire culture of the company has to be a place where you allow people to express their points of view, right? Because if I am concerned about it, and I might be the outlier to your point, if I feel like the company, if I work for one woman, one man, one interior designer, or I work for an entire company that's, 30, 40, 50 people, if I have the confidence that there's an open-minded culture, then I'm more likely to overcome my uncomfortableness with saying something, right? So it's a two-way. Like the person has to have the courage, but the company has to have the culture of being like, hey, I have an open mind. Tell me what you're thinking, right?
Exactly. Exactly. There has
Yeah.
to be that mentality and that acceptance of correcting and being corrected, and
Yes.
knowing that it can be a respectful, conversation. It can be a valuable exchange where actually each side may be able to learn something from the other. So I think if we look at it that way as an opportunity for growth and for trying out something that we're not doing on a regular basis now, we
Right.
can, both sides can kind of lean into that vulnerability too.
Right.
And we can create that space where these conversations aren't as tense, or it isn't such a stressful moment, that it can be something that we can get through and do what designers do and come up with other alternatives and creative
Yeah.
solutions.
And it would seem to me that this has to start with the leader, with the owner. Like, the first step can't be the person that, I mean, how do we want to describe it? The marginalized person, the outlier? Like, what word seems right for you, Jessica? Because I know you don't mean just a person of color. You mean
Right.
every type of thing that gets a bias against, right?
Right. Right. So I usually just use the term historically excluded people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is, it doesn't start. It might have to
Mhm.
if an historically excluded person has some real courage. But the truth is, I don't think that you're really saying that it should start with them. It should start with the owner. It should start with the leaders to say, we're open for feedback. We're open to know what we don't know, right?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
that is on the leaders, the managers to set that tone and to send that signal that this is a safe space for those conversations. And you'll hear the buzzword in the DEI space about inclusive leadership. And that's a lot about what this is, sending
Okay.
intentionally sending those signals and creating that space where these conversations can happen.
Right, right, right. Okay. So that is a very That is a very big action step that both the person that's establishing the culture in a design firm and the historically excluded person in a design firm can take. One can say, I'm going to set the table that it feels safe for valid, not valid, but true, honest conversation and corrections, right? And then for the historically excluded person to test the waters and say, what happens if I tell some truths here? What happens if I express some concerns here? Right.
Right. Right.
Okay.
It's
That's heavy. That's that first step is heavy.
it is it's big, but honestly, I think it can open the door for everything else that follows.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. It's great advice. Okay. Okay. So that's step one. And habit two. What's habit two?
And habit 2 is asking questions. And this is about everybody in a space, in a design team, in a design environment, being willing to ask questions about things that they may not be familiar with. Um, or even if they don't have a pointed question to say, I'm picking up this signal here. Is that actually accurate? Is it authentic? Asking broader questions like, have we considered all perspectives? And that is a really powerful question because it creates that opportunity for everyone to kind of pause and think, are we considering all perspectives? Are there other voices that maybe we need to bring into this conversation? Are there other people that maybe we should consult? Are there other, customers that we should go back to and bring into this conversation, or even ask customers, can you recommend other people that we should talk to?
Right.
So I think that it's just wise to feel like there is freedom to ask questions. I think sometimes designers, we approach our work like we have to figure it out, like we should know everything. And I think that's just a default. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that is just part of the creative process. Like, oh, someone came to me to solve this problem. Let me solve it. But when it comes to identity and representing cultures and identity in an authentic way, that does require getting other viewpoints and perspectives.
Right. Okay. And so what's interesting is, again, when you say the beginning, I have one thought. And then as you describe and explain, I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. So what I'm thinking you're saying to us is, when you're saying asking questions, yes, you mean within your team, but actually what you mean is in the design process. So maybe I'm designing for hospitality, it's a restaurant or whatever. And maybe I'm from one culture, one community, but you're saying, ask your client, ask the people who you're designing the restaurant for. Are there communities? Are there cultures? Are there things that you need to know while I go and design this space? And what you're saying is, don't feel as the designer that you need to know that ahead of time, that have the courage again to start the conversation with the client, whether it's for their home or because again, even the home, right? Like there's there could be people in the family with disabilities. There could be mixed cultures in the home. So even a residential home, I hear what you're saying. You're saying whoever you're working with, what do I need to know about this home and this space that reflects you and your identity as a whole family that lives here, right? Am I on the right
Exactly.
track?
You're definitely on the right track. We just have to be more used to just asking the questions and feeling like it is okay to ask the questions and actually valuing that input that we get because it can help us design, excuse me, that much more effectively. Yeah.
You know what goes through my mind? And I'm this is where I go out on a limb and you just have to smack me back if you're like, stop it. You thought you got it, but you didn't. So what goes through my mind is if I'm a white interior designer, I'm in a home and I see the family photo and there is a person in the family that is in a wheelchair, husband, kid, spouse, partner, whoever. Maybe I don't actually know a lot about ADA design, right? I know it's out there, but I don't have a degree in it and I've never designed for it before. I don't think that I would feel funny either saying, hey, I see the wheelchair. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say the wheelchair, you know what I'm saying? But like, I wouldn't feel funny bringing it up and saying, where does this child need to travel through the house? What in the house isn't helpful for this child? What can we do to make it easier for your child with the wheelchair, to maneuver around this environment, right? And I wouldn't be funny about asking my colleagues that have more experience with this, right? In other words, to your point, I wouldn't think I have to know, but I would know it's my responsibility to find out. But this is where I'm like, all right, you're on a little thin ice here. Maybe this is a crazy question. But like, if I look at the family photo and it's mixed race, is this like where I sit? Like, that's what I'm asking you, Jessica. It's a really, like, I feel like it's a dumb question, but I feel like if I'm going to ask it, it's in this show with you, right? Is that also, as a designer, is that a place where I say, is there a culture for your middle child here that we want to honor? Like, is that what we're talking? You're like, no, you're absolutely being ridiculous now, LuAnn.
No, Luann. Actually, that gets to the questions that are part of the Design for Identity blueprint. And one of the most powerful questions in that process is at the very beginning, asking, what about your identity would you like to see celebrated in this space? So to me, that just opens the door for any type of response. And I intentionally left that broad, because then it's also not on the designer to say, I see this, I'm observing that, I think
Right.
that, I'm guessing that. You're just opening it up and saying, what would you like to, what should I know?
Okay, because
Um,
it does seem a little icky to actually, I see that you have a child of color. Should I design for that? Like, that's like, I mean, I don't want to exclude designing for that, but it also does feel stupid. It just feels like I'm actually being, I don't know. I don't think it's patronizing, but it just doesn't seem right. So I love what you're saying. The beginning of every conversation with a potential client, or once you've signed, is, you know, what is the identity? What do you want to see expressed from your identity? And then if I'm the mother of a mixed race child, or I've adopted a child from another race, I can share with you if that's important. My
exactly.
child is from, Asia, and I would like to honor this in their room, or in our family room, or blah, blah, blah. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. And then that creates that space too for there to be that dialogue. And it takes it, once again, it takes the burden off of the designer to, I guess, maybe make assumptions, which could also
That's what I say.
steer
The
the
other makes
conversation very,
assumptions, right?
it could go
The
very
other is,
wrong.
yeah, that's what I couldn't, you're pinpointing it. It's like, it wasn't patronizing, it's assumptive, and that's obnoxious,
Yeah.
right? The assumptive process, like, I'm sorry, sweetie. Like, that's, our neighbor in the picture. Stop. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Or it came with the
like,
frame.
yeah, like, it just is too assumptive, and that is also rude and unkind and not right. So,
Yeah,
got it. Okay. So that's the whole point, right? Like, it's the having an open, broader conversation in the beginning, so that the whole thing is handled with respect and tact and kindness, right?
exactly. And it's also so that the customer can be forthcoming about the things that they really want to be forthcoming about. They may not want you to touch on anything related to ethnicity in their home. That may just not be something that is top of mind to them. So it's
Mhm.
intentionally, leaving it on the customer to share what is meaningful to them.
I love it. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Okay. So, habit number 3 is seek knowledge.
Yes, seek knowledge. Now, this one is it's funny to me that this would need to be stated in this day and time of like accessibility to as much data and information as we have. But it is important for a culturally competent designer to proactively seek knowledge about people of different backgrounds, different belief systems, different lifestyles, etc. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, because once again, like I said, the information is there and it's there in so many forms that are authentic to the people and their identities. There are documentaries that are out there. There are different ways that people are sharing their own lives and perspectives and experiences through film, through interviews, through blogs. Like, there is no shortage of information out there about people from their own perspectives. So I
Mm.
think it's on us to take advantage of that and to proactively seek that out. And it doesn't always have to be tied to a particular project, or even one particular identity. Like I said, there's just so much information out there that we could just on our own get on Netflix, in a day and come up with so many things that you could just learn so much.
Right.
And that we can just have that information. We don't have to memorize every little point about it, but we know it's there. And we know that these resources are there if we need to refer back to in the context of designing. So that's one thing that's really just key. There's so much out there. There's no reason not to access it.
Well, and the thing is, the analogy is that as designers, you do tons of things to seek knowledge about design,
Right.
right? Even going to museums when you're on vacation, you're informing, the different periods of the styles in design. And even like when you're on a subway platform, you're looking at the way the columns are built and way the architecture is. It's like, and reading magazines in your free time about design, and like you said, watching television shows about design. It's like you're just saying open your world to all cultures, all styles, all peoples, and that will help inform a design that is for all identities, is the point of what you're saying. It's just all data that's going into your head, and you're not memorizing the columns in Rome when you're visiting, but all of a sudden a spark comes when you're designing a fireplace, surround or something, and you say, "Ooh, wait a minute, I remember that little line there," right?
Right.
And so that's what you're saying, I think, right? Is like do the same thing as a global citizen.
Exactly. And also keeping in mind how narrow the focus was in our design education. Um,
Mm.
it's very Western focused. Even if we look at different cultures, it's usually through the lens and the interpretation of, this European
Yep.
influence. So that also just points out the fact there's so much out there for us to still learn, even about design. How is design being executed in other countries, in other cultures? What has their historical context been for their own creations and for the evolution of design in different cultures as well? Because that has not been a traditional part of our design education in the United States. So there's so much more to be aware of, and to me, that's just so much more inspiration that we can
Right.
bring into our work, and just it can expand our horizons in so many ways. And then I do also want to point out, there we look at the composition of our profession. Most firms are predominantly white, and not that race is the only factor we're talking about, but there is that significance there, because when you're in an environment like that, you're usually going to talk about things that are familiar to you. And
Right.
you're going, your experience will largely be your frame of reference. But I think what also happens, and I see this more in the DEI space in general as well, is there is this expectation that we can't start talking about difference until we bring people of different backgrounds into the organization.
Right.
That is not true, because, like we said, there is information available and accessible to
Right.
all of us.
Right.
And it is also not the responsibility of those people to come into a firm and educate their peers. So that's something that we could, I think I don't know if it's always subconscious, but it is definitely a concept out there that, oh, well, when we start our diversity hiring, or when, we bring in more people of identity X, Y, and Z, then we can start talking about it. And that's not true. That's
Got it.
just not true.
That's good. You know what? I hear what you're saying there. It A doesn't wait until then. That's absurd, you're saying. But B, once if you have the privilege of having a person from a different culture, a different race, a different, like historically excluded identity, it's not their job to teach you how to do things, right?
Exactly.
It's like, right? It wouldn't be, I don't care who you hire. You never look at it like it's your job to come teach me about my business.
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
okay, so, even like bookkeepers, right? Like I say all the time that you have to have a bookkeeper. You should have a bookkeeper because you're probably right brain and not, but that doesn't mean the bookkeeper runs your finances. The bookkeeper doesn't tell you what to do. You have to know enough to manage your bookkeeper. You have to go get the information on how QuickBooks is run and how it relates to your operation and your P&L and your balance statement. And then you can partner with your bookkeeper to manage this area of your business well. But it's not like, okay, so I have a bookkeeper so I can check out. And the same with this. Great. I hired, somebody from Asia, and now they're going to, lead this cultural competency of like in my firm. Like, no,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a point well made. That's a point well made. And also, I don't have to do it or I can't do it until I have someone working for me.
Exactly.
You're saying seek knowledge. It's like, go get the information, go get the knowledge,
Yeah.
right?
And it's also about even exploring your own identity. The identity of whiteness is very real, and it has very real impacts on how we design. No one needs someone else to come out, come from somewhere else and lead that conversation. We can reflect on our own about who we are and how we're showing up. And that is relevant too. That is very significant in looking at the overall landscape of cultural competence and design.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Gosh, these are like so eye-opening. Well, when I read the book, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, habit number 4 is talk to customers.
Yes, 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 yes. Now, this is critical, and it's basically what the what the majority of the book is about. We have to be willing to engage with customers because we are the experts on design, but they are the experts on themselves. And when I hear the term co-creation tossed around a lot, but to me, that is what it's about. It's bringing together subject matter expertise and then the individual and personal expertise to create something that is really meaningful and authentic to those customers. So it's something I see in the design process overall, and in interior design. We have our initial consultations, and in a larger commercial project, maybe we'll do focus groups up front. We have our standard routine, but the issue is that even if we start with that, we often don't revisit what we've heard or go back to our customers until the very end. And that in doing that, we miss so many opportunities to validate our design concepts along the way. And if we don't do that, we're waiting till the end, and more often than not, if we do get feedback that says, no, this is wrong, this is inaccurate, etc., it's too expensive or it's too late to fix.
Right.
So why not create those opportunities throughout the design process to go back and say, okay, this is what we've come up with. Does this resonate with you? Right. And even in asking that question, making space for that conversation, we also have to be willing to pivot if we have not gotten it right. So that's the importance of not just talking to customers. I think it's about really connecting with them so that they feel like you are invested in this. You are invested in representing them and their identity in a truly respectful way. And I think that goes a long way in terms of building a relationship throughout the design process. And, more often than not, there may be opportunities, or there are likely to be opportunities for renovations, for going back and doing to retrofit a space and everything. And if you built that relationship with the customers up front, they're likely to come back to you. Yes. And they'll know that you have really valuable information that you're even starting with to even take it to the next level. So, if you go through a whole design process and at the end, you may come up with a list of things that maybe would be top priority for the next phase. And there is value in people not having to start from scratch and telling you why it's all important.
Right. Let me just school you on the whole thing all over again.
Exactly.
It's like, no, Sally Smith gets me.
Exactly.
She gets me. We've already done all the deep
We did
work.
the work. We did the work. Exactly. And I don't want to have to do that again. And right. I saw that they actually respected and valued what I shared. So I'm willing to do that again. There's, just like we talked about, that vulnerability in, just being willing to have the conversations. I think that exercising that vulnerability builds trust. Yes. And once you have that trust, that can go a long way in terms of continuing a relationship and building business and expanding business too. There is
Mm-hmm.
that side of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So,
So it's the thing to me is it seems like if we're following your other steps that we've covered in the first episode of this and the other parts of your book, which is having those questions at the beginning, what identity would you like me to design and help you express in this space and all of that. When we're having them from a residential standpoint, I feel like we're way less likely to be that far into the process and have these mistakes, right? And have these oversights that we just really put our blinders on and designed for our own perspective and didn't account for who we were designing for. But I could see in hospitality and in commercial, like that getting completely overlooked. So example I'm thinking of is like a designer I know designs a ton of rehab facilities, all across the country. And it would be like, I don't know what is an appropriate design, but like, I can't imagine that a like yellow bedroom or a red paint on walls in a rehab facility dormitory, like the bedroom is appropriate. That just seems very highly agitating. Like,
right.
I'm already in distress and let's just have red walls here. Right. And so, but I'm sure that there are deeper layers of design for a rehab facility that need to be considered, that this designer and her firm have probably, to your point, learned through the years, through conversations, and having done many of them. So the idea is, as opposed to thinking what you think is good for this. Oh, I think it would be good to have cheery, wonderful rooms, and we should have bright colors, and we should have, stars on the walls. And maybe that's all appropriate because I'm not a designer for drug rehab facilities. But the idea is designing for the best comfort, best care, best feelings, best outcome for the persons that are using it, whether that is an historically excluded identity, whether it's, that, right? Like
Right.
it's that. It's really like, well, for me, I would think she probably has spent many, many times having conversations with the therapist, the psychiatrist, what helps here, what's comforting here, what do we need to have happen in this room? Do we want, creativity? Do we want calmness? Do we want to press some buttons in this room? Do we want to get some reactions here? Right? Like,
Right.
everything is for a purpose, and design affects and impacts those purposes, right?
Exactly. And to that point, you mentioned the doctors talking to the therapist, et cetera, but also talking to the actual clients.
Patience.
Yeah, that
Patient.
what are they experiencing in those spaces? And there can be instances where I think there are a lot of assumptions made because we think, oh, well, I've talked to the doctor. I've talked
Right.
to the professional, like they get it. And yes, they have very valuable input, but also so do the
The
people who have
end
to be in
user,
this space. Like
actually.
you
Yeah,
have
the
to,
end user.
yeah, because there could be a disconnect between what
Well,
you
it's
think will
true.
work and what actually does.
Well, it's true. And that we've, everybody knows I've mentioned Cheryl Janis 1,000 times over the 7 years of the podcast. I met her the first year, and she had a series of very significant health events, accidents, different things that happened to her, a serious car accident, different things that required her for over a long period of time, probably more than a year, to be in and out of everything from hospital all the way through various rehab situations. And she pivoted her business to be boutique healthcare design because she was consistently coming to a place feeling at her lowest and being further depleted by the surroundings.
Yeah.
And she was just like, this this could be so much better as a user experience, right?
Right.
And so, and it also just even occurs to me, it's almost like the same as like assuming every little girl wants a pink Barbie room.
Right.
It's like, if you had designed a pink Barbie room for me, I would be like, okay, I'm going into my brother's room. Like, no, right? Like, it's making those broad assumptions again and not doing the seeking of the knowledge is what you're saying to us.
Definitely. And it also, when
And
you
talking
mentioned
to the customers.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned the medical environments, I will say I grew up in a an area that was more an underserved community, and having to go into those healthcare facilities left such a bad taste in my mouth. And it's horrible because you're already in this vulnerable position. You need care, and you walk in and you're greeted with images that look nothing like you. People who are like, there's a kind of setup that there can be in places where it's either welcoming when you come in, or it's very procedural. Go sit down, we'll call your name. And the colors can reinforce that or counteract it, all of these things. And so I've always been sensitive to those types of spaces and that environment. And also, you think about what the outcomes of that can be. If you don't feel cared for, you're going to be less likely to seek out care when you need it, because who wants that experience? So there's just so many correlations between this experience that we create and actual outcomes for the people that we're designing for, that we have to be mindful of.
Yeah. I love it. So talk to customers, talk to the people who use the space, right? Okay.
Totally.
Number 5. This one's a big one.
Yes. Believe people.
Believe people. Ask a question and believe the answer.
Believe the answer. And, it's funny. You mentioned that the analogy with the bookkeeper, a business owner having the bookkeeper come in. When you do hire that bookkeeper, you have to trust that, to an extent, that what they're telling you is actually legit. Like you don't have time to become the bookkeeper yourself. So you have to appreciate the fact, this is the expert.
This is their expertise. I actually am in the hole by $25,000 and I cannot put my head in the sand.
Right. And it's a similar kind of scenario when we are creating this space for conversation with people about their identity. We have to believe what they share with us. It's not on us as designers to try to reinterpret it, to edit out things that make us uncomfortable or don't resonate with us. We have to take what people are saying as fact and take that as inputs that we incorporate into the design process. And I say this because I think this is also human nature. I don't think this is just about designers. I think it is human nature for us to ask questions, to be a little skeptical about things that are not part of our normal frame of reference. But we also can't make ourselves the editor of somebody else's truth. We have to take it for what it is and go from there. And the thing is, we can usually learn so much in those moments that we just weren't familiar with before, and it can be a benefit to us. And it's funny, I was actually having a conversation about this habit with another designer, and she told me about a scenario where the designer she worked for had a client of a different cultural background. So they had different requirements for a space in the home. And the designer was really conflicted about it. Like, this isn't normal. This isn't how I usually design. This isn't what I do. And she was just looking at this person like, it's not about you. It's not about what's normal. They're telling you, these are my requirements. It is that simple. Please design with these requirements in mind. So, that's why I felt it was moments like that, instances and examples like that, are why I thought it was really important to just explicitly say, believe people. It seems like one of the most basic things, like to even write down the words. I was just like, well, but it's necessary to say.
I'm picturing you in your study, like, am I really going to tell people to believe people? Like, yep, I am.
It is.
Well, it's funny because that's it, when you know that happened, when you have a living, breathing person that told you that this was a real thing, I think that seems a little incredulous that a professional designer would say, no, I don't design like that. You don't really need that. It's like leaving square footage for a prayer room, right? For somebody. Well, but don't we want to put a spa there? It's like, no, we kind of want a prayer room there, sweetie. Like,
right. And figure it out.
Yeah, it's so funny, right? And it's funny because I think that at face value, we want to say that people do it because because of, not because of negative reasons, but a positive reason, which is they think they know better. And it's like, but you don't. And I have to say, on a very small scale, my son-in-law, I love him to death. He is the most kind, generous person. I mean, it's crazy. We go head to head. We are like totally two fire personalities, but his being is generosity. His being is, what can I do for you, Lou? Right. And the thing is, he will ask me on the regular, like we will get into like him and I know we're not actually fighting, but if you were watching, you'd be like, I'm sorry, this started because he said, would you like a piece of cake? You know what I mean? And I'll be like, no, I'll just go, no, thanks. And I'll be like, no, but it's really good. And I'll be like, great, I don't want one. He'll be like, I don't understand. This is really good cake. And you love this kind of cake. I'm like, I got it, but I don't want one now. Like, believe me, I'm a grown adult. If I want a piece of cake, I'll say, yes, thank you. But like, this is a recurring theme between us. It's like he will literally, I'll be like, this started, and they'll be like, well, I mean, and then he says this, he doesn't really mean it. Go, oh, well, don't yell at me like this, right? Because that's our signal for, okay, we're both being ridiculous now. But I'll just look at him and be like, it just started with me wanting to give you a piece of cake. And I'll be like, and it could have ended if you believed me.
Right. But that is the gist of it, like thinking
exactly.
that you know what somebody else needs or wants, or especially as a designer, like I'm the authority. I do this all the time. This is my thing. You came to me. But yeah, for certain things, yes. But things about identity, no.
Yeah, right. It's things about a little more serious than cake, folks. Right? I mean, it is a thing though, right? And it's like, and it doesn't matter if it's cake or a prayer room or something else. It's what it is whether you come from it from a good thing, like, I really want you to have this. I really think the spa you'll enjoy. Like, no, believe me, this is what I need. This is what I want. Like, just move on.
Right.
Like, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And number 6, the final habit is share experience.
Yes. Now, this is another thing that I think happens when we've created environments where people feel that their perspectives are valued and where they'll be, received with respect and integrity and authenticity as well. But sharing experience is about everyone in kind of a design space feeling like they can share from their own lived experience as a person from a historically excluded background, sharing experience from maybe even past projects where you worked with a similar community, for example. It may not be, you're saying just because it worked for this project, it's necessarily going to work exactly the same for this one. But it's about having that space where people are just used to sharing experiences, sharing perspectives based on their own experience and what they've seen in different types of backgrounds, different types of communities, different types of belief systems, etc. So, and it goes to that point about how this has to be an environment where everybody can kind of have their voice heard, and there's space for those conversations to happen. And it's not necessarily to say that any one person is always right, or that everybody is necessarily going to be forthcoming, in an environment like that. Because once again, this goes back to a lot about building trust for these kinds of conversations to happen. But as a culturally competent designer, we can take it on ourselves to kind of set that tone, to create that space, and to model the behavior of sharing experience too. And just like I mentioned, this can be more trying and challenging for people of historically excluded backgrounds. But the input that we have, the insights that we have, are actually the ones that need to be heard.
Exactly.
As designers, we're dealing with a customer base and a whole economy that is changing. The demographics are shifting. There are more identities that we need to be keying into and connecting with, so that we're staying current with what's happening across different backgrounds, because those are our clients. These people that maybe we've been ignoring up to now, or maybe not prioritizing, are going to be the primary composition of our customer base
Right.
going forward. So we
Right.
can't afford to remain ignorant, or to continue to diminish or dismiss people of certain identities, because they are the future. They are your future talent pool,
Right.
as well as your future customer base. So making that space to have these conversations can be very critical, and it's a habit that I think we all need to start flexing because it's going to be necessary.
Well, what I love is that I feel like one of the core themes of your work is in relating it to the design industry, right? Is relating DEI and inclusivity to the design industry and these really amazing habits that we can adopt in order to take action in this area. But I think one of the core things that I'm hearing is that these are principles, these are ideas, these are things that we should be doing to be better humans. However, if that's not enough to get your mojo going, understand this is your business. Your business is going to dramatically change over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And you just said it. Your customer base is going to change. The employee base that you have is going to change. And if you've got your head stuck in, well, that's not the way I want to do it, and I like the old way, you're going to be left behind. It's like I said, it should be enough as a global citizen to open your eyes and treat all, historically excluded identities with respect and care and love. But I love that your book is just like, you know what, designers and design industry, if you don't get on board, you're going to get knocked out of the way. Right.
Exactly. And that is where we're going. And I tend more towards that argument about being a better human.
Yeah.
So I don't always default to the business conversation, but from a business standpoint, I get that. And I think that that's
Yes.
something that design, design firms and business owners need to understand, that as well, that it's happening.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
with this, with DEI being a more prevalent conversation in this space overall, your competition may be talking about this, strategizing about it, and if they're ahead of the curve and you're not, then what's going to happen? Who's going to get the
Hmm.
customers? Who's going to get that talent, the diverse talent that you're going to need to connect with this more diverse population? So we have to just lean into this. This is going to be something that's critical. It is a business imperative.
Hmm.
And it's something that, once again, don't want to solely look at it through that lens,
No, of
but
course not.
it's very significant, and it is happening. And it's
Right.
also something where, a lot of organizations have made statements about DEI, about standing for social justice, especially from the summer of 2020.
Hmm.
But they don't have much to point to show that they've done anything
That they're
different.
doing anything. Right.
um,
Exactly.
so if you've created an environment where these habits are evident, you've created a space where maybe if somebody from outside of your firm is asking what is it like to practice design there, and people can point to some of these habits, like we weren't having these conversations 2 and 3 years ago, but we're having them now.
No.
We are, we may not have all of the answers, but we are collectively having different kinds of conversations so we can get there. We've created an environment where identity is something that may not be the easiest thing to address, but we're talking about it. We're doing something about it. I feel like I can share perspectives from my own life in the execution of my work. It's like, for your workforce to be able to say that,
Mm. Huge.
that's really, it's huge, it's powerful. And
It's
when you
huge.
also think about the fact that most of us, most organizations rely on employer referrals to a certain extent in terms of
It's
recruiting,
true.
what story do you want them to be able to tell?
Right, 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 right.
Yeah.
And it to your entire message here, it carries through to your consumer.
Right.
You know, if your consumer is feeling that and they really understand that this is a real thing for you, and you as a company and as a culture are leading with this, like you made the one point, they'll come back to you because they don't have to start over every time trying to
Right.
figure out, are you a forward thinker? Are you an inclusive thinker? Or do I have to educate you again? You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
And
Right? It's
and
like the hard work has been done. Some of the hard work has been done. The foundation has been laid.
exactly, exactly. And are you really into this, or did you just put a statement out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people can tell real quick if it was just an in the moment kind of reactionary thing. Oh,
Yeah.
we have a DEI committee. Like we did it. No, you did not. You did not. And it's interesting too when I talk to leaders about DEI and about the importance of authenticity. I always tell them, you have to understand when people of historically excluded backgrounds talk to someone within your organization, they're going to ask, what is it like to work there? And what is it like for us to work there? And
Wow.
the answer to that second question can turn people off really quickly.
Right.
So, once again, as leaders, we have to be mindful of the environment that we're creating, and we have to be mindful of our duty of care to the people that
Mm.
we employ and the people that we serve as customers.
It's so good. It's so good. It's this your approach to this, the knowledge that you bring to this, Jessica, and um the just the education that you're bringing to this is just at such a great level. It just really is. It makes it um it's I mean, I'm gonna say it's understandable, it's digestible, it's logical, it's like right what's in front of our face. Like you said, believe them. It's right in front of our face, but we do often need all of these habits to be in front of us and to think about, are we living these? Are we saying them on a poster,
Hmm.
or are we living them?
Right.
And they're two different things. And the truth is that every one of your habits is significant, but none of them are undoable,
Right.
unattainable. They're not like, oh, I'm sorry, that's like 7,000 sit-ups in a day. No, it's like, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you read them and you're just like, why wouldn't I do this? Why am I not doing this?
It's like that couch to 5K workout. you
Right?
know, starting from nothing, but hey, this is reasonable. And
That's it.
I wanted to present it that way because when I really look at it, to me, these actions can be that simple. Not necessarily easy, but
Right.
not really complicated either.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. And the thing is, I think this really will separate all of the interior design firm owners, all the brands, all the things in the industry. These simple 6 habits, it's absolutely going to separate the talkers from the doers.
Exactly.
Period. That's it. Are you talking about this issue, or you are doing about this issue? Because these are doable. These are 100% doable and
Definitely.
impactful. Especially when we get the benefit of reading your explanation in the book and then hearing your words explain each of these habits. It's like, oh, these are deep. These are deep and these are meaningful. So, oh my goodness, I just adore you. I swear to goodness. And I have to tell you, you're speaking at High Point. So you've told me that you're speaking at High Point at 3:00 on Saturday. I think that's the 14th of October.
Yes.
And I told you I had a 2:00 and a 4:00 panel discussion. And I was like, how the heck am I going to be done at 3 and have to be somewhere at 4 and see Jessica in the middle? And so I've already managed the organizers of the 4:00 to move it to 4:30.
Oh, awesome.
So
That's great.
now I'm working on the organizers of the 2:00 to move it to 1:30. Because I just have enjoyed getting to know you in person in DC for a few moments, and now these last 2 conversations, and I want to see you do your stuff real life in that theater. I want to see you do it. I want to feel the change in the audience. I want to feel the ahas that people are going to go, oh That's the thing. That's a real thing, and I can do that thing. I can make things in this industry better by following these principles. So I'm going to do everything I can
Thank
to
you.
be there. So I'm super excited. And if I can't move the 2 to 1:30, I will be there for a little bit and get in, and then, and I will encourage everybody to go and see you in the theater, because I just think that you are going to set this industry on fire, and I'm excited to watch you do it.
Oh, thank you so much. And it would be great to see your face in the audience. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for having such a heartfelt, compassionate conversation. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I just think I really do. I think you're going to literally light this industry up. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, LuAnn.
There you have it. 6 habits. Simple. Not easy. Simple though. Direct. Understandable. Relatable. Gettable, right? We have to start somewhere. Like I said in the introduction, everything is connected, including these 6 habits. Each one builds on the other. And when you do that, build one on the other, that will build momentum. In part 1 of our conversation a couple of weeks ago, Jessica emphasized that in her book, she aims to normalize the challenging conversations about identity and to help us take actions, big and small, to create meaningful outcomes when it comes to historically excluded groups and when it comes to our designs, okay? She explains that cultural competence is about learning and unlearning and then flexing those muscles to strengthen our knowledge until it's natural, like muscle memory. Habits are what form from muscle memory, okay? I bet you do this in your own life. You get up and you stretch, you make a smoothie. You go for a walk after lunch, okay? Maybe you watch some TV after you put the kids to bed. Whatever your habits are, your body remembers them. Okay, but this isn't just about physical habits. Remember, we're working on this holistic level, this holistic approach, right? We can make mental and emotional habits stick as well by making them part of our life, our routine, our awareness, right? So let's go back step by step. The first habit is accountability. What does this mean? It means if you see something, say something. Don't wait on someone else. Don't expect someone else to. Take accountability and call what you see into question. In episode 573, I spoke with Cheryl Luckett as part of our BLM series, and she talked about this concept of see something, say something. It's a great show to listen to if you want to understand accountability a little bit more. Jessica, though, brings accountability back to the design process. She's saying if you see something early on that isn't quite sitting right, say something, right? Like that team at Louis Vuitton, making a sweater with a Jamaican flag that has the wrong colors, right? So I'm talking to you as a business owner now. That team at Louis Vuitton, if they saw it, obviously didn't feel like they could say something. So don't put your team or your clients in that position, in that feeling, right? Make sure that your culture is set up so that these conversations can happen. Make sure that you're providing safe and welcoming spaces that allow for everyone to express their points of view. Remember, you set the tone. Jessica calls this inclusive leadership. I love it. The second habit is ask questions. She says this is about everybody in a space, everyone on a design team and in a design environment. Everyone being willing to ask questions about the things that they may not be familiar with and ask, have we considered all perspectives? Okay. Jessica says this needs to happen at the beginning of the process, and she gives us the exact language to use. What about your identity would you like to see celebrated in this space? It's a great question because it opens the door for your client to respond in any way without you making any assumptions. Love that too. Third habit is to seek knowledge. Knowledge is right at our fingertips these days. There is no excuses not to know, not to find, not to be able to read, right? When I think about this habit, I'm reminded of the past show with Jamel Williams, episode number 596. And he talked about the call to create opportunity and change at the university level. Layden Lewis and I also discussed a similar topic to this in episode 703. Both of these designers brought up the current narrow focus in education to teach only white Eurocentric Western design. I mean, this is just categorically unacceptable. Eurocentric Western design is not the only kind of design. And if you only design from this viewpoint, then you're not being a global citizen in this industry, the kind of global designer the industry needs. Right now, hard stop, right? Jessica's fourth habit is to talk to your customers. Now you're saying, I do talk to my customers, LuAnn. Of course you do. But are you talking about the things that actually matter? Do they realize that you truly value their opinion? And I ask you, do you value their opinion? Okay? Because if you say you're going for design for identity, then this is a big chunk of it. And if you've read Jessica's book, you'll remember that a large portion of it is dedicated to this habit of talking to your customers. Remember, you may be the design expert for sure, and I hope you are, but they are the subject matter expert of their lives, right? Jessica says that this often starts out in the beginning, that we talk and we ask questions, but then it doesn't get revisited often enough throughout the entire design process. And if you don't revisit this conversation with your clients, guess what? You're missing out on valuable opportunities on current projects and future projects. Because she explained, when a client knows they can trust you and knows they don't have to start from scratch with you, that's gold. You can be that person. You can be the one they want to come back to simply by talking and listening. All right? When Jessica and I talked about this, I mentioned Cheryl Janis. In episode 720, we did a flashback to that episode about finding your niche. It is a good show to listen to. But the reason I bring it up is that Cheryl said that her experiences defined her career path. Be the designer that allows different experiences and perspectives to define the spaces they are intended for. Okay? The fifth habit, also a big one, is believe people. I know this might seem like a no-brainer, but you know how many people don't do it? Just do it. Believe people, because their experience is not your experience. It doesn't matter how good your intentions are. Think about it. When you speak your truth on anything, and the other person, regardless of how nicely framed, explains, quote unquote, to you why this or that is actually better, or the real case, or what you don't see and what you don't know, aren't you thinking, okay, you asked my opinion, but I guess you actually only wanted confirmation of your existing opinion. And what do? I know what I do. I check out. I'm like, bye. Okay? Now, the sixth and final habit from Jessica is to share experiences. Like I just said, someone else's experience is not yours, but that doesn't mean you can't learn from it. We all need to share our experiences more here in the podcast, in real life, in industry events like High Point, where Jessica will be giving her keynote speech, or at LuAnn Live coming up in November. We need to make the spaces, wherever we are, to make these conversations possible. Can you feel the momentum? If you can, keep at it. And if you can't, that's because you're not part of it. Change that, okay? Jessica makes a point. I'm going to reiterate it here, that sharing is imperative, personally and in business. You absolutely need to be having these conversations and listening to those around you, because these are your clients. The world is changing right in front of your eyes, and your future customer base is changing as well. Okay? Now, these principles and ideas, all of them are things that we should be doing anyway to be good humans. Am I right? Going back to the beginning, that's what a holistic view looks like. And this approach that Jessica laid out for us today with these 6 habits emphasizes respecting everyone's diverse identities, values, and experiences. And by putting them into action, your perspectives might begin to shift and change, bringing you back into balance. All right. I cannot wait to hear Jessica in person at the High Point Theater and to see her again in person. I'm reminding you, her keynote speech is Saturday, October 14th, 2023 at 3 p.m. If you are at High Point, don't miss it. And get her book, Design for Identity, How to Design Authentically for a Diverse World. This quick recap of her book and her philosophy, it's just the beginning. And I know you are going to want to start to put these ideas into action, okay? We've put this in the show notes, the link to her book, okay? You can also go to jessicabantom.com. If you're interested in how it all works together and how you bring a more holistic viewpoint to your life and your business, then I hope you will join me at LuAnn Live this year, because it is just packed full of all the good stuff, and you will leave truly understanding how every part of your life impacts another. Okay? And if you need a little nudge, join me and my daughter Christy tomorrow, September 13th, 2023. That's, of course, if you're listening to this in real time on September 12th. We are going to be doing a live webinar at noon on wellness and, health and wealth for you, okay? We'll be talking about the intersection of design and personal well-being, which is, I think, is a really good start to thinking about designing for identity. Okay, recognizing and honoring each of your clients, employees, trades, and colleagues' identities is a step in contributing to their wellness and in being an advocate and a supporter of them. Okay, so this webinar is hosted by My Doma Studio. Okay, we will put the link for that in the show notes as well. You do have to register, but of course it is free. All right, thank you, Jessica. I loved getting into each of these habits step by step. I am looking forward to hearing how each of you is incorporating them into your design practices. So thanks for being here with me, Jessica. And thank you for listening. Doing this together is all the juice I need every single day, and I appreciate you so much. And I'm grateful that we continue to do this together. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Nigara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNigara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.